All right. Well, hey, thanks for having me out, you guys. I'm actually really excited to be here. I know everybody's heading into the playoffs. So when they asked me to put together a presentation, I thought I would talk a little bit about some things that you can do to get ready for this upcoming weekend and through the push to the playoffs, but also to get your mindset for the off season as well. It's such an incredible time of the year for you guys. And congratulations on all your success that brought you to here. So we're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. You guys can follow along. I'm going to ask you to be active in the chat room. You don't have to be, but I want you to think about a few things. And then if you have any questions, we can address it afterwards. So I'll just get on with it here and do a little screen share. There we are. And just thumbs up if you guys can see that okay. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I've titled this one Performance Planning, the push for the postseason, because that's kind of where you guys are at. And we're going to go through some things that I believe are critical for athlete performance inside of the competitive world, but also in terms of getting you ready for that environment. It is such a great game to train for. So I'm excited to have everybody on today. When we look at annual planning for our players, it doesn't matter what sport they're involved in, but we use this strategy of reverse engineering. We always start at the end and we work back to where we are. So at the start of this season, we would have looked at this very time frame for you guys and reverse engineered it in a very special way. You know, we look at these annual plans, and this is what we try to get all of our athletes thinking about. Right now, for example, you guys are right here. If you see my little cursor, you guys are peaking now to get into the postseason, and that's exactly what should be happening here. And for all the parents, coaches, and players out there, there's an ebb and flow that goes into athlete management and player performance. And it revolves around not just the time frame of performance, but some very important factors that you've all heard about before, but unfortunately, we don't pay a lot of attention to. And one of the big ones is volume and quantity of training over here. You can see early in the offseason, this would represent the offseason as you guys travel through the playoffs, get into your offseason, a nice active rest transition phase through here. But then you start looking at the volume, and the volume in this phase is very high, and it should be, because that's where we're getting some real constructive work done. Not only that, we're working on other parts of our game, maybe the mental game. We might be sitting with a nutrition counselor. We might be getting with our therapist and taking care of business to get ready for really intense training. You can see the intensity here is actually quite low, and the skill, technical, tactical side of the game is almost non-existent. This is an optimum plan for an athlete. Unfortunately, we've been messing it up so much as of late that it's really resulting in a lot of problems in sport. What I would encourage everybody here to think about is the ebb and flow of this annual plan. Right now, you guys have to be drop dead focused on what's coming up over the next couple weekends, and that's going to be fun. But as you go through, just keep in mind this annual plan and really respect this athlete preparation side, because if you want to raise this level of performance here for playoffs or for your regular season, these rules have to apply. And I hope that makes sense. And we could talk all day about that stuff for sure, but it is a very important aspect of athlete and player management as we go through the season. So I'm excited to get you guys at this critical point in your season. It doesn't matter where we're at. One of the things we always look at as you guys head into these playoffs, we always think about problem solving. And if I had a wish for everybody here, the parents, the coaches, certainly the athletes, I would wish for you to really become an excellent problem solver. Problem solving leads to great decision making. And if we're really going to optimize your performance, listen, performance in sport is really simply all about problem solving. What you got to understand is there's not a lot we can't train. So here's an example. And if you guys want to get in the chat box on this, I'd really appreciate it, because I'd like to see where your minds are at. But just let me ask you a question. What do you guys think is the most important factor in maximizing skill, talent, and for performance outcomes, if you guys were to think about it? And again, there's no real wrong answer here. But if you were to think about the big picture of athlete development and talent development and skill acquisition, what would be the most important factors? Well, when we look at the research, here are 8 things, if this is going to work. Let me see. Yeah, here are 8 things that we feel out of the data and the research and our experience with athletes really contribute to this. If you guys were to pick one of these 8 factors in athlete development, talent development, skill acquisition, which one do you think would be the most important? Physical preparation with the strength coaches and the therapists? Is it getting involved in the competitive environment and really honing your skills and testing yourself at the competitive level? Is it sleep and rest, really being ready on a day-to-day basis? Could it be practice with your team and your coaches? How important is that in the big picture? And where does it rank among all these other factors? Nutrition and hydration, mental preparedness, playing with friends in free time, just getting out there, nobody judging, nobody watching, nobody teaching, you just going out there, freestyle, getting it done. Or practice by yourself with nobody watching. Which one of these would you guys choose? In the study, in the studies, in the research and the data, there is one clear contributor to talent development, skill acquisition, and overall athlete player development. And it's practicing by yourself with no one watching. A lot of this talent data comes out of looking at the music world and the culinary arts, dance, and the fine arts. But when it comes to sport, everything is so measured. And if you were to go on YouTube right now, you could find some unbelievable videos of guys like Connor McDavid or Crosby or, some of the best players in the game, just inside of the arenas, just flipping pucks against the wall or getting out early and just messing around before the coaches come on. This is an incredibly important time that, unfortunately, for the bigger picture, we've really lost this independent practice time. So I'm going to encourage you guys just to think about that, because it is vitally important. In our programs, we program it in. We actually schedule it in. The other big one, and for team sports like hockey, and when you get more elite, practicing with the team and your coach is very critical. You still need to get away and practice those individual skills to make yourself special and work on the areas that will help you achieve in the game. But those are the 2 big ones, okay? And again, remember, a problem accurately defined is already partially solved. And this is part of the problem-solving process for athletes at every level of the game, surely at the elite levels as well. Here's a similar question, but in a different context. Now, what do you think is the most important factor in maximizing athlete and player development on a day-to-day basis? Your levels of readiness day to day now. The last one was talent, athlete development, skill acquisition. That was big picture stuff. This is, what do you think are the most important factors contributing to your performance and readiness every single day? If we were to give you these 6 options, what would you guys say are the most important here? I'm just going to turn on my chat on my thing here so I can see. Yeah. Okay. And it's funny because I have actually asked major organizations this, and I'm really surprised at the breadth and the different answers. There's no wrong answer, but I will tell you there is a right answer, if that makes sense, right? Okay, but this is a very important question for you guys, especially as you head into these next couple of weeks, okay? The number one factor sleep and rest. When it comes to human performance, the number one factor in all of our programs, and we know the number one influence on your ability to perform on a day-to-day basis is your sleep and your rest. Unfortunately, it is one of the most misused, underutilized, and misunderstood parts of athlete and player development. We've gotten into this habit with the greatest of intentions of doing more and more and more when we're probably needing to do less and less. And that's why we've set up a hierarchy of priorities for every athlete we work with and every program we work with. And I want to share them with you here today. These are our priorities for every single athlete we work with, whether they're a weekend warrior, a young developing athlete, or our elite Olympic and professional guys. These are the foundations of human performance in sport. I want to share them with you, and we're going to go through each one. the first thing we look at is rest, recovery, and sleep is king. It's the first thing we evaluate when we start working with any athlete, team, or organization. There are rest strategies, recovery strategies, and certainly sleep strategies we talk about. But when we look at the program as a whole, the amount of work you do, the volume and intensity as you go through the season has to depend on the quality and quantity of your rest. Our entire programs are built around that principle. Nutrition and hydration, we know, drive performance, and it's a number two. It's a close number two, but it is number two. Then we have posture and range of motion, our setup, not only to get you ready for the game, but to maintain health, wellness, and performance over the course of a season. Your warm-up period can be a huge weapon here. We'll talk about that as well. And then we have to teach movement. I'll tell you this right now, in all my years, I've been lucky enough to work in high performance sport for more than 30 years right now at the professional level, Olympic level. And I have probably experienced only a handful of athletes in all that time, in the thousands of athletes who are really competent, pure movers. Here's the crazy thing. It is so trainable and teachable. It's nuts. And it can literally change the career path of an athlete. We've taken 7-year veterans of the NHL, taught them fundamental movement skills, only to see them go on to heights in the game that they never dreamed of. It is one of our top priorities because it's so trainable. And then last but not least, the brain game. This is the latest addition to our hierarchy here, but this brain game is such a massive, massive monster, but it's so important to sport performance that we had to put it in here. Here's the crazy thing about the brain game. It's kind of like our utility player. This guy can fit in anywhere in the hierarchy, depending on your needs right now and as you move forward. But the brain game is also much, much more than just mental performance. And we'll talk about that as well. So let's dive into it. And if you guys have questions, if you have concerns, or if you're having problems in any one of these areas, write down your questions and we'll have time at the end to discuss them, okay? Let's talk about sleep. I really want to make sure you guys are set up with this because it will impact your performance this weekend. Today is what, Wednesday, I believe? I think it's Wednesday. I don't even know what day it is. But if it's Wednesday, you would not believe how much we can do in terms of managing your sleep to improve your performance for this weekend. It's astounding. And I want to share it with you. It's the reason it's our number one priority in sport. It affects absolutely everything we do. If you guys show up to the arena or the gym or your training facility without enough sleep, your level of readiness, your ability to learn and respond to training is submaximal. That's all I need you guys to know. 30% of the population right now is walking around with a 5 to 10 hour sleep debt per week. That means they're missing 5 to 10 vital hours of sleep that they should be getting, and the results are catastrophic. Sleep debt, when you don't get enough sleep on that day-to-day basis, it accumulates over time. There's no question. And what do? Well, we mask it with caffeine and energy drinks. We use, some of the medicines out there and stimulants. The problem is those things can make us feel all right. They might help us perform a bit more, but they don't help us recover. They don't solve the problem. The problem with not getting enough sleep is your ability to recover cognitively, physically, and neurologically can't happen. It doesn't matter what you do to mask it. So keep that in mind. It is our number one priority. The majority of athletes, the good news, have pretty good sleep. Out of all the athletes, they have pretty good sleep, but they also, with all the travel, when they don't get great sleep, they're very resilient. And that's the glory of being in great shape. You tolerate sleep debt to an incredible level. But here's the deal. You need to be aware of it, because if it accumulates too far, well, listen, that's when the bottom falls out. You've heard about slumps or injuries, or you've seen guys who perform really well and all of a sudden they're not quite there. Your ability to learn and maintain, the bottom falls out, and it happens quite quickly. There's this thing called the circadian rhythm. And here's what I want you guys to think about, okay? And keep this, if you guys have notepads right now, I just want you to draw a little circle and write 24 hours in it. And I want you to sleep on this. I want you to remember this, and I want you to live by this in all of our programs. And this has turned out to be an incredibly powerful tool for our athletes. We talk about the 24-hour sleep-wake cycle, the 24-hour window of performance. Our athletes never make more than a 24-hour mistake. If you guys can get into managing yourself, you have your long-term planning, and then you reverse engineer it, and then you have your 24-hour cycles that you can monitor. It can change the developmental pathway of an athlete. So just keep in mind that circadian rhythm, the 24-hour sleep-wake cycle that we all operate on. If you learn to optimize that, we'll find out how good you can be in the game. When it comes to this 24-hour cycle, light is the key, okay? We need you to get morning light, preferably when the sun is low on the horizon, because that's when it actually goes into our eyes and affects our brains in the most powerful way. So if you can get up in the morning, get outside, walk around 10 minutes, that would be the best case scenario, early when the sun is just coming up in the sky, okay? Light through glass, when you're driving or if you're sitting in the porch with your glass, it disrupts the effects of light on our brain. It's not nearly as effective. Okay, get sunlight as quickly as you can getting up, preferably that morning light. In the evening, also get that low light. Get outside in the evening, even if it's cold, go out and shovel the walk or just go for a walk the dog, but get that low light because it helps reset and get you set for a good sleep of night. That's that 24-hour cycle for sleep. It can have a huge impact on your performance. The circadian rhythm affects alertness, your response to training, physical and cognitive recovery, and your ability to perform at optimum levels. That's why we focus on that 24-hour window. Then within that 24 hours, there's these smaller cycles that are actually quite as important as well. This science actually drives how we put together our training programs, our practice plans on the ice, our practice and training programs off of the ice. These cycles work in sort of 30, 60, and 90-minute cycles, okay? Sleep-wake cycles, you'll see this in a minute. They work on sort of a 90-minute cycle, but this is really important for memory, concentration, learning, decision-making, reaction time, and brain recovery, more in the moment type stuff. And that's why we don't like our athletes in the weight room longer than 90 minutes. Our weight room programs are rarely more than 45 minutes of pure work. And at school, and when we have our athletes in a learning environment, whether it's at a training camp, we try to break them into 90-minute cycles with a 20-minute rest. Okay. One of the big things and one of the big tools in the sleep area of performance is napping. We always say sleep like a pro, and naps are a huge, massive tool for you to use if you're not getting enough sleep over the course of a week. We'll talk about it. So if we look at how sleep works really quickly here, and you don't need to know the science, but I wanted you to understand this because it sparks a very important conversation for our athletes. You get this stuff called melatonin that's released in the brain, and it follows the circadian cycle. And natural melatonin builds up in the afternoon and into the evening. It gets you set up for sleep. Adenosine is this other chemical in the body that builds up over the course of the day, and it's something that actually makes you feel sleepy. If you don't get enough sleep or enough good sleep, you might get a big adenosine buildup in the morning and you feel groggy. That's one of the ways we figure out if our athletes aren't sleeping enough. But when we take caffeine, it blocks that adenosine. And this is a danger trap for a lot of our athletes. Caffeine, it blocks the receptors for adenosine. And so when that caffeine wears off, you get a massive crash. And that's that caffeine crash we talk about. But the adenosine melatonin cycle are related to that morning and nighttime light. So keep that in mind. Over-the-counter sleep aids, okay, the melatonin or, even some of the cold medicines that athletes are using right now, we stop it. We just stop. Unless you have a doctor's help on this, you need to get away from any over-the-counter sleep aid. It is a dangerous game to play for athletes, especially because the over-the-counter sleep aids, yes, they can help you get to sleep, but they can also slow the activity of the neurons, which is never good. And it's not something that just turns off and on. So a huge warning shot across the bow. The only reason we would use a sleep aid is if we've identified a problem, a sleep problem that requires that kind of help. I hope you guys understand that. We see too many athletes destroying their performance by using those sleep aids. This is what sleep looks like, okay? Really quickly. I want you guys to see this because when you guys go to sleep over the next 2 nights, this is going to be critical for your performance on the weekend. Okay, light sleep is stage 1 and stage 2. Let me see if I can get my highlighter on here again. And you can see it. So stage 1 and stage 2 right here. These are those 90-minute cycles you'll see through your sleep. And this stage 2, stage 1 sleep is just when you're getting relaxing. Your breathing slows, your sleep to transition into the deeper cycles of sleep. And in the stage 1 or stage 2, you can actually wake up quite easily. Okay, it's an important time of the sleep cycle. But it's also important that you know what it does. It is the setup for sleep, stage 1 and 2. The deep sleep happens in stages 3 and 4. And this is where we want our athletes to be. And over the course of a night's sleep, you can see we get there once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, maybe 5 times. This one's not quite as deep, but these periods right here are critical for athlete performance and recovery, you guys. It's a game changer. We're talking muscle growth and repair. This is when our body, our pituitary gland, releases growth hormone so our body can repair itself, to repair tissues and cells. Our brains flush waste. Waking is very, very difficult here. And if you have an alarm, you want to try to set it up inside of your cycle. Everybody's a little bit different. If you wake up in one of these deep troughs, those are the times you wake up feeling groggy and terrible, right? So we want to try to time our wake times for these lighter stages of sleep. But this is the most critical stage of sleep for our athletes, and it's something we just wish for everybody. Stage 1, REM sleep, is also very, very important for a couple of great reasons. People don't realize this, but the brain is as active and sometimes more active during sleep than it is during the day. These cycles are 20 to 40-minute cycles, and your body temperature shuts off. But here's the important stuff, you guys. The brain re-energizes here. The brain re-energizes, and it's very, very active. This is where you have vivid dreams, and your body decides what's important. That memory consolidation, learning what you did in practice earlier this week will be locked into your brain during your sleep. The practice you did during the week, the things that you find important during that practice. And this is also where problem solving happens. Your brain, without even you being involved, is solving problems. It's absolutely fascinating and important, but that's how sleep works. And I need you guys, if you're going to be successful, short-term and long-term, you need to know this stuff, okay? How much sleep do you need? Well, it's greatly determined by the athlete, okay? And it has a huge impact on the day-to-day performance. But, you know, some athletes, we like to say a minimum of 7 for our athletes. 10 is a great option. And there was a great study done that really got everybody thinking about the importance of sleep in performance. It's called the Stanford Sleep Extension Study. You guys can go online, look it up. But it was a breakthrough study early in the sleep science development. What they did is they took their varsity basketball team in the first round of this. They're going, okay, what would be the impact of better sleep for our athletes? So they took their varsity athletes, you know, some of the top basketball players in the world, and they said, okay, look, guys, we're going to do a baseline and figure out how much sleep you're getting on average, and then we're going to mandatory for 5 to 6 weeks, have you spend 10 hours in bed. And we're going to try to get you sleeping more hours. And even if you're not asleep, they taught them breathing patterns, meditation. So even when they weren't asleep, they were getting the restorative benefits. It's called non-sleep restorative, non-deep sleep restorative recovery. And it can happen if you get in the right state. They showed their athletes how to do this. So when they did the baseline testing on these elite athletes, on average, the team was getting 6.5 hours per sleep a night. That's not enough for the average person, leave alone an elite athlete. After the sleep extension study, they were averaging 8.5 hours. So a 2-hour difference. Here's the difference. They tested them before and they tested them afterwards in a bunch of different parameters. The power, speed, and accuracy of shooting went up. The reaction time and decision-making went up. Overall rating of mood and physical and mental well-being during games and practices went up. That's the players' feedback. Man, I just feel better. Okay, I'm not as grumpy. I have patience. I'm smarter. I'm thinking better. And from the athletes themselves, when they were surveyed on it, improved vigor and decreased fatigue. just by sleeping more. It's something you can all do right now, and it's not as hard as you think. Step number one, this cannot happen. All right, Canada, we should all be proud. Canada is one of the only countries in the world to have a sleep science program for all of their Olympic programs. Other countries are trying to catch up now, but we were the first, and I think we're still the only one. And one of the problems we had at the elite level, the Olympic level, and even with our pro guys, is technology before bed. Ideally, in a perfect world, we'd want you turning your devices off 2 hours before you get into sleep. Now, what we're talking about here, and we realize this is tough in this day and age, but what we're saying is we don't want you texting your friends, and we don't want you playing Candy Crush till the wee hours of the morning, right? It's not so much the light. Yes, we know the light affects the brain, but it's the brain activity, you guys. It totally disrupts the critical sleep cycles you need to be in to be at your best as a hockey player on a day-to-day basis. So my recommendation for everybody here, and for parents who are listening, here's your ammo. Limit screen time 2 hours before bed. You can watch TV. Honestly, you can sit there and veg out. One of the biggest problems is that activity, going back and forth with your teammates, your girlfriend, your mom and dad, if you're living away, or playing games. That brain activity is really the big disruptor. So that would be step number one. All right. Monitor the quality and quantity of your sleep. We have our athletes do sleep logs. Okay. How much do you need? Well, you need to determine whether you're a 7 hour, 8 hour, or 9 hour. I am personally an 8 hour sleep guy. Okay, and I monitor the quality of my sleep with sleep logs 2 to 3 times a year. Our athletes do it 2 times a year for sure, just so we know where they're at. There's this concept of blocking sleep, and I want you to understand this, okay? You don't have to get stressed out if you guys are traveling. Tomorrow's a travel day, I think Cody mentioned, right? For a lot of you, if you're traveling time zones, or you get in late, or there's a delay, you miss a flight, you might have a terrible night's sleep. Don't stress about it. We block our sleep, okay? We look at 7 days a week. If our athletes need 8 hours of sleep per night, 7 days a week, we know we need to get 56 hours of sleep over the course of the week. And that's an important number. If you have a terrible night's sleep for whatever reason, overtime or a bus breaks down or whatever, naps and a little extra sleep are the goals. Now, listen, here is the critical factor here. If we need to make up sleep, we do not sleep in. Athletes, players, listen to me carefully. One of the critical components to human performance is having a solid, consistent wake time as often as possible over the course of the week. You alter and change your bedtime, but try to have a consistent wake time early in the morning. And for our pro guys who play at night, we customize that for them. But just remember, consistent wake times. If you need to get more sleep, naps, which we'll talk about, and go to bed a little earlier. All right. Sleep debt. Okay. We track our sleep. We mentioned that already. It's very important to keep track of that. And naps are the way we really help our athletes make up that sleep debt. Now, listen, you start sleeping during the day over 30 minutes, you start getting into a spiral that can disrupt your night's sleep. So just keep that in mind. Midday, never after 4 p.m., 15-minute power naps. And if you get into the habit of that, it's a powerful thing. Okay. That's sleep. For this weekend, okay, and for the upcoming playoffs, sleep banking is a real thing. And what we've been doing with our athletes, whether it's our NFL guys, our Major League Baseball guys, or our Olympic athletes, if they're traveling, getting ready for a major competition or a tournament like this coming weekend, we'll get them to add on 30 minutes to 40 minutes of sleep for 3 or 4 days, up to a week before they actually leave for the event. We're banking that sleep so they go in at a high, a real important strategy, okay? I can't tell you how important sleep is. If that's the only thing we talked about tonight, I would sleep very well tonight, if that makes sense. It's how important it is. Nutrition and hydration, really quickly, just fundamental principles, you guys. We all know, but there's a couple of things here that are important. Never get hungry, never get thirsty. Breakfast, of course, starts the cycle. Your breakfast and what you eat for breakfast will actually set your metabolism for the entire day. So if you're having a coffee and a donut in the morning, guess what kind of a path your body's on? Not good. So a good hearty breakfast, small meals often for sure. But there's something about hydrating. It might be outside of sleep, the lowest hanging fruit in sport performance because not too many athletes do it right. And in your sport, you guys, we know how much you guys can lose over the course of a hockey game, especially if the arena is warm. It's unsurmountable almost. And that's why we have to have a strong, critically followed hydration plan for you guys. And that's why we need your weights as well. But listen, if you go into a game dehydrated, like for example, if I were to ask you guys, how many of you guys feel thirsty right now? When your body signals thirst, that's a good indicator that the water levels in your body are getting low. Okay, and in 1% dehydration, we kind of get that sensation that we need more water. All right, and it's a warning shot across the bow to us saying, hey man, keep that water up. Listen, if you go into a game or a warm-up where you're 1% dehydrated, it will be within 5-6 minutes, you'll be 2% dehydrated. And that's a breaking point. In terms of physical work, there's been measurements and studies showing that physical work, your ability to react, okay, your reaction time, decision-making, your ability and capacity to recover and sustain stamina drop 10 to 15%. Cognitive function can drop up to 20%. It's inexcusable. It should never happen. And hydrating is the way to do it. Water is your best weapon here. And you have to really, really watch your sugar intake. To give you guys an idea of the power of these two things, sleep and hydration, there was a study done, a real powerful study done in 2017. I want to share it with you, okay, just to really emphasize how important sleep and nutrition are. They looked at 340 elite athletes from all different sports. And what they tried to figure out is, why are some athletes injured or not able to recover or not at a high level of readiness on a day-to-day basis, and other athletes never get injured, and they're always at a level where they're ready to go, learning and responding to the training? Well, here's what they found. They monitored them for a good long time, and they found that the athletes were not getting the recommended amount of sleep on the weekdays, increased their likelihood of injury by 61%. That is a gigantic number that is you cannot not pay attention to that number. It is one of the biggest numbers we've ever seen in injury prevention. Other than this, the athletes who didn't get the recommended intake of fruits, vegetable, and fish had a 64% higher risk of injury. So taking care of those two things not only can help you perform, learn, and develop better, but in terms of reducing your risk of injury. And listen, we know one thing in sport, especially at the elite levels, the number one reason athletes never reach their potential in sport, period, is because of injury. Anything we can do to decrease risk of injury is uber important, okay? Posture is also one of the big ones. And this is where your warm-up can be one of your biggest weapons. If you guys think of how many hours you spend on the ice, how many strides you make, how many shots you make, all those activities are very one-sided. And this is kind of what happens to our hockey players. Whether you're right-handed or left-handed, we see these imbalances in the human body. These have to be prevented and attacked on a daily basis. And the warm-up's the time that we do it. So a dynamic warm-up, but paying attention to the readiness and the preparation away from the ice is really important. Posture and range of motion not only increase performance, but seriously reduce the risk of injury. If we look at it, what we like for you guys, when we look at skating performance as an example, we look at joint integrity, joint function, stability, and transfer of power. If those joints aren't stable, if the body's alignment isn't true and symmetrical, we can't have that pure, beautiful, straight running tire. This tire here, you guys have all felt the shimmy in a car, where you get 80 kilometers an hour and it's vibrating. It feels like it's going to shake off. Well, you're using way more energy and you're causing way more damage. Now, when we get those joints and tires running true, we can have this tire going 300 miles an hour with half the energy and no damage. And the body works in a very similar way. So it's a very, very important part of sport performance that has to be addressed on a weekly basis, okay? And then we teach movement, okay? In sport performance, we have to be movers first. I would love one day to get you guys together and do a movement clinic just to see where you guys are at. Because if there's potential here, there's potential on the ice. If I were to ask you guys a question, where do you think movement happens? What would you say? It's a question I frankly ask every athlete I work with. Doesn't matter whether they're elite pros, collegiate, whether they're Olympians, or they're grassroots developing athletes. This is something very few athletes truly understand. And of course, this is a movement. Moving my head, that's a movement. When I'm talking movement here, I'm talking about moving my center of mass, moving my body from point A to point B, or moving an object from point A to point B, a slap shot, a pass, throwing a ball, skating, moving to make a save. Where does movement happen? Well, it happens between your feet and the ground. When you're training as an athlete off the ice, that's what we focus on in every single exercise we do. For you guys on the ice, then we transfer it there. And here's an interesting thing. We've done a lot of work with elite hockey players. And what we have found, about 70% of the speed we create in dryland training transfers to on the ice. Now, if you get players who don't have a great skating stride, we train their speed, we get them on the ice, we get them into a good stride program. Now magic happens. It's so much fun, you guys. This is where the tires hit the road, though, movement. And then, of course, there's the brain game, okay? This is a very critical part of athlete development, and we're really just understanding the brain right now. This is the most complex organism in the entire universe. It's also one of the most sophisticated, mysterious ones. Right now, however, in the world of sport, we're at a very, very interesting time. It's maybe one of the most exciting times in recent sport history. What we now know about the brain and what we can now do with some of the new imaging is absolutely incredible. We can monitor, not only just monitor your brains, we can actually look at brain activity and train the brain in real time. Things we've never, ever been able to do before to help athletes cope, deal, and progress in ways they just haven't been able to before. So this is a very, very important part of the game. It's learning, memory, behavior, perception. And that perception of your game and of yourself is critically important. Decision-making, personality, mood, consciousness. There's so many factors here. The brain game is this massive, massive area of sport performance. And the mental game, mental performance is just one small sliver of that big picture. But when we bring this all together, match it up with an athlete development program that links into a player performance program, guys, this is where the magic happens, okay? The cool thing about the brain game, all right, we know we can control it. We know more about it now than we ever have before. And I know you guys have talked about it with Marty and some of the other experts here before, but I have seen firsthand the power of meditation in helping athletes deal with performance anxiety or the butterflies, the power of visualization and imagery, music and words, and how that can impact your brain and your physical performance, the pre-routine, pre, during, and post routines. And then, of course, breathing. Breathing is the switch to the nervous system. And if you guys can learn how to breathe properly and how to use breathing to maximize your performance, not just before a game, not just before your training, but even during a game, between shifts, between periods, it is an incredibly powerful tool. And there's lots of strategies. That slow, calm breathing that we'll use can really help you turn on or turn off your nervous system. It can help with stress and anxiety. We use it to calm our athletes down, or we can use it to fire you up. Hard, deep nose breathing, 10 breaths can really, really excite the nervous system. We also use breathing to help our athletes sleep better. We have a number of strategies here that have just been really, really powerful for our athletes in terms of sleep, and of course for overall performance. Okay, and breathing is one of those switches, one of those controllers we have for our brain. So when we realize, what's going on in our brain and that self-awareness, we have tools and strategies to help us cope with it. Your performance goes to the next level, and it's fun. So we have these priorities: rest, recovery, sleep is king. I would ask you guys, I would wish that you live, eat, and breathe by these priorities. There has not been a person on the planet that can budge me off of these, because nobody's proven these to be invaluable or proven that anything else is more valuable in terms of athlete development and performance. The brain game, Dr. Mrazek is one of the reasons the brain game is in our top 5 now, because of the work they're doing and our understanding of the brain game. But if you guys can work these into your athlete development program, your player performance goes through the roof. When we talk about goals and objectives, just a few more minutes here, Cody, if we're okay. Yeah. Okay. Look, just a couple of things I want to talk about here. Goals and objectives. There's sometimes a misunderstanding of goals and objectives. And it's really important for me as a performance specialist to understand where an athlete's at, not just as they exist as an athlete, but also how it coordinates with player performance as well. The goals and objectives of both of those worlds for an athlete and player collide and impact each other. An annual team goal and objective is really important. An individual player goal and objective. I would hope you guys have goals and objectives going into this weekend. Okay. Personal ones, team ones, of course, but I hope they're reasonable. All right. Your goals might be, if you're a coach or a parent or a player, all have different goals, but to support the outcome. Okay. A goal is an achievable outcome that's generally broader or longer term. It would be like mapping out your trip, a vacation. You have a destination. You really need to understand where you're at, and you have to sort of map out your path for getting there. So we like our athletes to set their goal, their big goal, and then forget about it. And then we set our objectives. Our objectives are shorter term milestones, so to speak, that define and measure our actions and if we're actually accomplishing what we need to do to achieve our goals, if that makes sense. So your goal for this weekend would be one thing, and then your objective for achieving those goals would be the other. And we do that not just for short periods like this, you guys going into a playoff weekend. We do that for annual planning, phases of the annual plan, and then we can even break it down for a shift. We can break it down for a game, for a period. We can break it down for a phase of the off season. So, for you, if we were to ask you going into this weekend, what would be your number one goal and your number one objective? It would be a great conversation to have for your team, for you. And remember, winning is not a goal. It's not a good goal, and it is not a great objective. And here's why. Winning is out of your control for the most part. You do not control whether you win or lose. And this is something that really impacts athletes and players negatively. But if you guys can understand that winning ultimately isn't in your control, you might just push your game to new levels. What is in your control is what you do to obtain the best outcomes possible. And that's very, very important to realize. So many athletes set winning as a goal, or even scoring a goal. How much of scoring a goal is actually in your control? Just think about these things. So when we go about setting our goals and objectives, we're very, very strategic. We want them to be meaningful, powerful, and obtainable based on where you're at and where you need to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Most of our athletes, our teams, and our organizations, we like to map out 4-year plans. 1 year is good, 2 years is great, 3 years is fun, but in 4 years, we can really, really influence your performance and your ability to play the game. All right. Focusing on the result. Winning's a result, and we should never, ever be focused on results. Focus on the process. And this is the last thing I'm going to talk about today. Okay. The last thing, and it's an important exercise that we do all the time with our athletes. It's called controlling the controllables. And I'm hoping you guys have probably had this conversation before. If you haven't, this will be great. If you have, I apologize, but it's never, ever a bad idea to review this. Okay. Control the controllables. What we ask our athletes to do going into this weekend, define clearly and concisely what you control. What is in your control as a hockey player on your team? Then define what you do not control. What's out of your control in the game. As soon as you do those two things, you help your brain differentiate what you are going to focus on and what you should not focus on. It's a powerful tool, you guys. Focus on the process. Be in the moment and forget about the results. If we're thinking about a result, we cannot be thinking about what we need to do right now to get the job done. It's a very, very powerful process in the world of sport performance, but it's underutilized at every level of the game. This is what we give every one of our athletes. This would be a great thing to do tonight or tomorrow for this upcoming weekend. It'll be great to share this with your team and get together and have everybody do this. Every one of our athletes, we do this 3 to 4 times a year to revisit it. Great conversations come up. There's rule changes. There's things that happen in a game or in training, right? So it's a powerful tool. The recovery game, you have that intensity, that volume, and that frequency that we talked about. Remember those and honor those as you guys go through your season, all right? This annual plan is very important. And again, remember, you guys are right here getting close to peak performance and in your season heading into the playoffs. You have your volume, which should be very low right now. You have your intensity, which should be incredibly high heading into the playoffs. The frequency, well, we're at the mercy of the competitive schedule, but we would build your recovery process, your nutrition and hydration and your sleep strategies around the weekend schedule for this coming weekend. We would also plan our travel around that schedule as well. Sport training demands and movement efficiencies, such fun stuff. And it's all trainable and doable. But remember, it's a long game, everybody. How you respond, it is a long, long game. A problem accurately defined. One final tool that you guys could use this weekend, anytime we have an athlete who's having difficulties. And again, one of my wishes for everybody on this call would be to help you become better problem solvers, and better decision makers. That would be my dream for everybody. So, I have no idea. So when we go into this weekend, we would have an approach. When you get there, you might have an approach for a game. You might have an approach for a period and a shift. We would have an approach. So we want you to set up a clear, concise approach, goal and objective. Then you get your result. And remember, the result is totally out of your control. The result for your shift, the result for your period, the result for your game, the result for your training. You get your result. Here's the critical part of athlete development, the ebb and flow of performance mindset, performance training, and performance competition is how you respond to that result. Learning to respond properly helps you set the next approach, which helps you advance your game. And listen, we have to learn from the failures as much and even more so sometimes than we do the successes. This 3-step approach, we teach to every one of our athletes. We see it in locker rooms. We see it posted on mirrors. Guys have it written on their hats. They write it in their journals. Approach, result, response. Go into this weekend with your personal approach. Understand your team approach. Go out, play your first game. Look at that result. Make an adaptation, make a response. Go play your first shift, make a response. Have that first period, make a response. How you respond, more often than not, especially at the elite levels of the game where the skill levels are so high and so even, who responds better has more success. And that is a powerful tool I'd like you guys to take with you. I don't know where these red lines came from. I'd like to actually figure that out one day. But guys, if you have any questions, okay, or if you want to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. And Calvin and Hobbes, if you don't read Calvin and Hobbes, read Calvin and Hobbes. He's smarter than he looks.